Can you please make a video on the top 15 objects that, in your opinion, enhance boat life? That was asked by Pam Early.
Good question.
Yeah.
We did cover this off in an extra that we did some years ago. In fact, I think we did a couple of sort of top fives.
Yeah, we have done a few of those top things. I think it'd be quite interesting to look back over those and see how much has changed since then, because I can think of two things that probably didn't appear that I would want to add into, which has given us 15. That's loads to think about, isn't it?
That's almost everything on the boat, isn't it?
Yeah, so not going to answer it right now, but I thought we should let the viewers and listeners come up with things that they think would enhance life on a boat. So anyone listening, anyone watching, let us know in the comments what you think would enhance life on your boat or on our boat. Hello, I'm Liz.
And I'm Jamie.
Welcome to Follow the Boat, in which we discuss what it's really like to give it all up to live on a boat.
And go travelling around the world. We've been doing it since 2006 and we're still at it.
Each week we talk about our latest YouTube videos.
And about boats, sailing, travel or anything else which floats into our heads.
And if you leave a comment we like, we'll give you an answer and a name check. Peace and fair winds. So this is podcast number 14. Can you believe it?
14, eh?
I know, that's 3 months at least of podcasts, if not more.
And they've coincided with our travels leaving Sabah.
Yeah.
So if you're new to this, just to reiterate that this is a podcast chat that comes out on Thursdays.
Yep.
Both as an audio podcast on your favourite podcast platforms and YouTube as an extra bonus. And this is outside of our normal Sunday vlog, which covers our travels aboard our boat. That's where you get all the dynamic footage of us sailing.
Yes.
This is really just a chat.
This is just two heads blibber blabbering on at each other.
Blibber blabbering. I like that word.
Yeah, just made that one up.
It sounds about right.
Yeah, we do just blibber blabber. In fact, we have said this before, the only time that you and I really sit down and talk to each other is once a week in front of these cameras doing these podcasts.
Well, that's just not true. I talk to you all the time, you just choose to ignore them.
Oh dear, I think we could both say that, don't we? So here we are, this is chat number 14, podcast 14, whatever you want to call it. It hasn't got a theme yet as we start, but by the end I think we might have found a theme. But really what this one is all about is answering questions that we have had on various platforms, mostly YouTube, some other social media. So first of all, we always like to say what the date is. It's the 19th of April. And do you know what the time is?
The time is 10:15 in the morning. I just checked.
Okay, but that is UTC +8.
+7.
Well, no, that's because it's now British summertime, but
Oh,
UTC remains the same, doesn't it?
Yes, I only ever think in terms of what the time is in the UK
I know.
when I talk to my family.
Okay. So I haven't said where we are, and we know why we don't say where we are now, because we like to make our listeners and our viewers work for some of this. As we talked last week about, if you want to know where we are, you look us up on, what's it called, Vessel Finder?
Marinetraffic.com.
Yeah.
There is another website, and it's
Yes.
called, I think it's called vesselfinder.com.
Yeah.
We'll put a link in the descriptions.
Yeah.
But yeah, really the reason why we didn't want to give away our location is because these podcasts are approximately 4 to 6 weeks in front of our vlog. Now, someone did ask, and I didn't make a note of their question actually. They said, can you please put the date in your vlogs? And it was because we'd been talking about the restrictions of COVID. Well, that could apply to anything over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But I did say to him, the vlogs are about, at the moment now, I think they're about 2 months behind
Yes.
the podcast and real time. Because, of course, these podcasts are real time. They get published 2 days after we
Yeah.
record it.
Yeah, so Tuesday today goes out Thursday night. So yeah, so these are very, very current. So if you want to know where we are currently, get on Vessel Tracker or marinetraffic.com, and you can find us by using the name of the boat, which is SY Esper, ESPER, or you can use the MMSI number. Can you remember what it stands for?
Marine Mobile.
Well, you couldn't remember last week, and I had no chance of remembering, but very kindly, Tuvia, on YouTube said MMSI equals Maritime Mobile Service Identity.
Now, Tuvia has been following us in real time using our MMSI number, because they even wrote a comment on our video yesterday, and they referenced an anchorage we had tried to get into but couldn't.
I've got it here. He says, I reckon you're in Kwandang or thereabout.
No. No, even more recent. No, literally, we had just tried to get into an anchorage which is now not suitable because it's just full of fishing platforms. And it's an anchorage that's recognised by a few pilot guides and sources as being a good alternative to another bigger anchorage. But unfortunately, and maybe it's because of COVID, it was just full of fishing platforms, and there was no way of anchoring in there.
Yeah, it was devastating, wasn't it?
But I think you had put on your mobile app to transmit our current location, and we tried to duck in, we gave up, and we came out again. And as we were coming out, Tuvia had said, oh, how come this anchorage has just popped up? So it just shows to show you that while you've got your app on, you can track us in real time.
Yeah, no, it's really quick, isn't it? So if anyone wants to know where we are now, Tuvia, probably already does know exactly where we are. I'm going to use that app as much as I possibly can. We do need to be online for it to work.
If by the way, if you're not sure what we're talking about, refer back to last week's podcast where we explain this in more detail.
Yes, so it gives our AIS position. So let's start. Unless there's something else you want to say before we start?
There's always something to say.
I know. So that was Tuvia.
I just like interrupting you because I know it annoys you.
Yeah, and then you don't remember anything I say, so I can say anything I like, really. Going to first of all talk about home, because the two episodes that we're going to reference are Indonesia Won't Let Us In, which came out on Sunday. And that was all about the problem of leaving Malaysia, having left Malaysia and then not being allowed into Indonesia. So that was number one. And then also, why can't we go home, which was last week's chat, talking about the idea of getting home. And then what is home? What do we regard as home? Loads of people got interested in that subject. Ben Stabile or Stabile, not sure. Home is where the heart is. Now, a lot of people said that, obviously. But what he says, he tells us about the background. This expression is generally attributed to the Roman naval commander Gaius Plinius Secundus, known to historians as Pliny the Elder, AD 23 to 79.
I was really impressed by this, but I didn't look it up to check that it was true. Did you look it up?
No, I didn't.
So we're just taking Ben's word.
We are. Right? I believe everything Ben says. So if that's true, that's brilliant. So now we know where it comes from. It's Roman, and of course he was a naval commander, so even better. Lars Overland. Home is where you decide it should be. I really like that. I'm 55, my wife 49. The plan was to sell our house, to live on a boat, and then came COVID. Sometime this May, our home will be listed and we will start the boat project again. We're still arguing about Nauticat versus Lagoon. Oh, I've got something to say on that. Anyway, thanks to the inspiration, we need more grown-ups babbling on YouTube about alternatives to brick and mortar. So Nauticat or Lagoon?
Well, that's a no-brainer, surely.
I know.
I mean, I don't want to upset any owners of either vessel, so I'm not going to say which, because I don't like to upset people.
Well, we do
although
know.
I'm very good at it.
You are. I think I'm better at it, aren't I? I'm always up, because people know my opinion of catamarans. You're on the fence. But what I would say is that we know a couple on a Nauticat, and we've been on that boat lots of times, and it is an incredible boat.
They are very solidly built.
Yeah.
I mean, they are up there as some of the best sailboats that we've come across, and I think often they are considered what do we call them? Motor sailors, yes. Yeah. Although I have to say their Nauticat, which is a Nauticat 52, although I always used to tease Anthony and call it a 51, which used to really annoy him. It was more of a sailboat than a motor sailor.
Well, they certainly sailed it a lot of places.
Yeah. So I love Nauticats. They are one of my favourite manufacturers of boats.
I totally agree. And if we had that, what boat would you like? It would be on the list.
Definitely.
You know, if money was no object, because they ain't cheap. So Lars, I think, don't take what we say as true, but we would both go for the Nauticat. Absolutely. Lagoons are comfortable, but Nauticats are fantastic sailing boats. Go anywhere in the world on those.
But do Nauticat make catamarans?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe he means it's a catamaran.
But I am not aware of a Nauticat catamaran, but maybe they do. So again, as you say, don't take our word for it.
Yeah, yeah. No doubt will be put right.
Because
in
we
the
should
comments.
explain, of course, that lagoons make catamarans.
Yes.
And I don't know of a monohull lagoon. And again, I could be wrong there, but lagoons are generally known for building catamarans.
Yeah. Boat makes and types and all of that are not really high on my list of important things. So I know the boats that I know, but I don't really know anything else. Okay, so moving on, talking about home. Alto Culto says, home is wherever my family is.
Yes, I like that comment.
Yeah.
I did like that comment, which justifies what I was talking about, my slip up by calling home my hometown where my parents live.
Yeah.
And there is a little piece of my heart still in my hometown because my family is there. And I wonder what would happen. I've often thought about this. What would happen if my family moved out of that hometown and the only connections I then had were my old school friends?
Yeah.
And if my family moved elsewhere, would I call that my hometown? It's a difficult one, isn't it?
I think it's about growing up. I think that as you get older, a lot of people start their own families. They have children of their own. We don't. So it's slightly difficult. We kind of look up the generation to our parents as our family, but our brothers and sisters will look at their own children as their family, and those children, and so it goes. But I do think that as you get older, you make your own home, whatever it might be. Sometimes it includes friends, children, parents, but it's a vastly different thing for everybody. Paul Smyers, he's recently bought his boat and started sailing. We know Paul. We've only sailed the US East Coast and Bahamas, haven't taken the opportunity to truly cut loose. We have a residence that we technically called home while cruising, even though we were on the boat for over 10 months of the year. So we definitely had a place we called home that was home. But to answer your questions, home means where I feel safe and secure and all my things and the people I love are. While we were on the boat, home was the boat, absolutely. So that kind of goes on from what you're saying, really, I suppose.
Yes, although I'm a little bit confused by that because he said home is where his friends are, but also his possessions. Well, in our case, all our possessions are here, but our friends are mainly in the UK, although spread around the world now. So I think this just goes back to what I was saying, was that mainly this is our home, but there's a little bit of my heart elsewhere as well.
Yes. I like this one from Tammy. This was on Facebook. We're a military family and currently home is in Darwin, Northern Territories. Home to us is wherever we are posted at the time. Due to our current semi-transient lifestyle, we are considering buying either a yacht or caravan when we reach retirement age and nomading. The thought of plonking in one spot after years of moving around is a tad scary to us.
I'm forever fascinated by military families and that semi-nomadic lifestyle they lead, because I can think back at school, because we had a barracks near my hometown. It was a big barracks as well, so you would get army children come to school, but they would only ever be there for 2 or 3 years, and then they would move on. And I mean, on the one hand, that must be difficult as a child growing up to establish your roots, because we know how important it is to have friends, especially when you're younger, to have that kind of constant, I suppose. But on the other hand, you have this luxury of A, going and discovering new places, and B, being used to that kind of lifestyle, that semi-nomadic lifestyle. And I find it very interesting. We've met children of ambassadors is another example.
Diplomats of any
diplomats,
kind.
Diplomats. And these people are seemingly very well adjusted. And
why shouldn't they be?
And comfortable. What I mean is comfortable in new environments.
Yeah. Well, it's like us, you see, isn't it? We love going somewhere new, and staying anywhere for too long is actually physically painful. Being in Sabahan for that length of time, I was almost sick with boredom and this desperate restlessness. I think that Tammy and her family are going to love it.
I think so.
They're going to be on the road.
Yep.
Or on the sea, whatever it is. It sounds just right.
I hope they do it soon.
Yeah.
So good on them.
Yeah, good on them. I've got one more here from Tuvia again, who says, I've spent many years away from my childhood home in the US, but when I return, not very many people have been welcoming. Even some family members. I left, they stayed. I'm wintering in Mexico because I don't like cold weather, so for now, home is where I am. And that's a slightly different take on it. His whole point about...
Or hers.
Oh yes, Tuvia, yeah, sorry. Gosh, yeah.
We don't know.
You're absolutely right, yeah. So that point about when you go home and people not being that welcoming, we've experienced that, haven't we?
Yes, I wouldn't say that it's not welcoming.
That's the wrong word. Yeah.
It's a sense of detachment, and what I found when I went back, and you saw this last time when I tried to arrange to go out for a drink with friends I hadn't seen for 2 or 3 years, and literally one person turned up.
I know.
Because they've got young families, they're busy, they've got commitments, they're tired. So me returning to my hometown is far more important to me than it is to those people that live there.
Yeah.
And that was a hard one to swallow, actually. I got quite upset by that. But I have to understand that their priorities are not me.
No, they're not.
It's their family.
Yeah, so it's up to us to see the people that we want to see. I have a small, less than a handful of people I want to see when I go back, and I make arrangements to see them, and that's all I expect to see. And it's something we found when we first did this in Turkey in 2005, 2006. We discovered that some of the people we were closest to were the least interested in what we were up to. And some of the people that were friends, but we didn't realise our bonds were so strong, became closer friends back home.
Good
It
point.
certainly sorted out who your friends were, didn't it?
Definitely, yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a couple of occasions when I've gone back and there's almost a sense of resentment
Yes.
among people that I consider to be my friends who, totally not interested in asking anything about what we've been up to. And if I haven't seen someone for 3 or 4 years, my first question is, how's it going? What have you been up to?
Yeah.
And there was no sense of that, but also this kind of resentment that, well, you've been off gallivanting around and I've been stuck here bringing up my kids. There was that kind of weird, and I get uncomfortable when I'm faced with that kind of resentment.
It's much more common, I think, than people who are not doing what we're doing realise. They will, once they start doing this, suddenly discover that there is resentment from even your family, as he says, she says. Sometimes even your family, some people just don't want to know.
Yep.
And we've seen that.
Yep.
So. Okay, but we don't care because we just get on doing what we want to do. We love it. And the people that really care. Brian, M0OAB.
Now, I've never worked out, Brian M0OB has been commenting for years, and I love reading Brian's comments.
Yes.
I can't work out how to pronounce that. I just pronounce it as Brian Moob.
Well, I say Moab, but the second figure is a 0. It's not an O.
Brian, please tell us, what does your handle mean, and how do we pronounce it on camera and audio? We want to know.
Just going to call you Brian.
Okay.
And I wanted to read this comment out. It morphs from home into something else. We've been inspired and dream of owning a suitable boat to live on, saving as best we can, but it will likely be a retirement plan for our future. Right now, we can barely afford a trip to the exotic Canvey Island with crazy fuel prices and my thirsty 1992 classic Range Rover. So it's stop at home for now, or local camping trips that cost very little pennies. So Canvey Island, have you been there?
No, I haven't been to Canvey Island. That's Essex, isn't
Yes,
it?
it
Yeah.
is.
So I'm from Essex, but I'm from North Essex. Canvey Island is South Essex. I haven't been, but I did like Brian's reference to camping because I was brought up on camping, camping and caravanning. Very comfortable in a tent, although probably not these days with my back. But I got quite excited by Brian's comment, and because it brought back memories of camping as a kid around Essex and Suffolk areas. So.
And of course, camping puts you in good stead for sailing because there's lots of similarities between the two.
So there's a big crossover.
Keep doing it, Brian. Save the pennies, go camping.
Do you agree, or maybe you disagree? Leave a comment for us on Twitter @Followtheboat.
He then goes on to something new, so we're going to move away from home. I'm going to read this out and you're going to give your answer, okay? On a slightly different topic, I don't see much about SSB radio amongst the yachty YouTubers. Is it because they are limited on how they can use one, unlike us ham radio users that have many ways to use SSB, like sending pictures or emails over the HF bands, also various data modes to communicate, instead of phono, voice and Morse, da-dit-da. What's your thoughts on this subject? Cheers, Brian and Boo.
So, for those who don't know, SSB stands for single sideband radio. And if you're familiar with CB radio, it's a glorified version of CB. It's a much longer range. You need a license to operate one, and quite often you'll know an SSB ham radio operator by the size of his antenna in his back garden, because you can, in theory, communicate with astronauts and people the other side of the globe. That's how big this range is of SSB radio. And of course, before the more modern technologies now, it was probably the single best way of communicating aboard a boat. It did require some modification. As I said, it needs a license, and it also did require quite expensive units because they weren't cheap, these SSB radios. So I think what happened was really is that new technology took over and it became cheaper and more convenient. And I'm talking specifically about satellite communications. Of course, the diehard SSB fans will say, yes, but you know, you can't, it's free, basically, once you've got all the equipment. And you can communicate with anyone with an SSB radio.
I think in theory it's fantastic, and I wish that it was still going in some ways.
Yes, and more importantly, there used to be ham radio operators who would run what we call nets. Now, a net is, it's like a radio show, I suppose, a two-way communication between the person who's running the net on a daily or weekly basis and anyone that can pick up on this specific frequency, because they broadcast the net at the same time every day or every week.
And they will be giving a lot of weather information and that
Correct.
kind of thing.
Yes.
So if you've got cyclones coming, they're keeping you right up to date with what's going on there and other news subjects and things.
Yes. And I guess also it's a bit of company as well.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you have to remember that the height of the popularity of SSB was before mobile phones. And so when you're on these long passages, it was probably quite nice to be able to communicate with someone on land and as you say, get the weather updates, but also just to be able to chat.
We tried it.
We did. We ended up trying, we had 2 units in the end, and it wasn't particularly successful, but that was mainly the fault of my installation, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and also the second unit just broke down, stopped working. And we didn't have the budget because an ICOM 802, it ran into thousands. It was thousands, they are thousands of pounds, a new SSB unit.
So now we have sat phones and we use those instead, don't we?
Yeah, so I think when you're doing coastal, obviously mobile phone, much more convenient, and satellite for offshore communications and weather. Now, of course, there are pros and cons, and I'm sure SSB enthusiasts will still argue the case for SSB over satellite, because you have the expense of buying your data on satellite, the fact that you can only communicate with one person at a time, as you know, you use it as a normal phone to communicate with someone, so you don't have that community element of it, and so your weather data you're having to pay for by buying data credit.
The thing with the SSB, of course, is that so few people are using it now, you'd have fewer and fewer people you could talk to.
Well, I would say there are still probably lots of enthusiasts based on land.
But on land, yeah.
Yeah. I think also what's happened recently because of COVID, as I understand it, I heard this from someone, that a couple of the old nets that used to run. For example, might be an operator based in Africa who runs a net that covers the whole of the Indian Ocean for cruisers. And these kind of nets have closed down because no one was using them, because no one was travelling.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I love the idea of SSB. I think if money were no object, we would have got a really good SSB unit and got it installed properly, got the licence. But that just didn't happen.
So there you go, that's SSBs. If anyone still wants more clarification, they should watch Tony Hancock, the amateur ham radio half hour, because that will tell you everything you need to know about being a ham radio operator. Have you ever seen it?
No, I don't know. This is obviously one of his famous ones.
It's classic Tony Hancock, from the late 50s, and it's one of his best, so look out for that.
Talking of communication, I wanted to go on to Dean Nihilist, who in last week's episode 298, Indonesia Won't Let Us In, we talked about the Q flag, or rather, as we refer to it, the quarantine flag. And there was a shot of you raising the yellow flag as we entered into Indonesia, and we incorrectly said we were raising the quarantine flag. And I realised as I was editing it that this was incorrect, but Dean Nihilist came in with a really good comment who said the Q flag, and I should explain that every letter of the alphabet has a corresponding flag. And these flags on their own mean something. So ships for generations have been using flags as a way to communicate. And he says the Q flag, which stands for Quebec, has nothing to do with quarantine except for the first alphabet of the word. So, as I said, each flag means something. Just as an example, if ever you've been diving, quite often you might see a blue and white flag, which means which is the alpha for A, and you put that up when there's a diver down. So it means when you raise that flag on your mast, it means I've got a diver down around my boat. All other boats keep clear. It is instead a request for free pratique, which basically means entry into a port under the assurance that you are free of contagious diseases.
Right.
If, on the other hand, you think you're infectious and require real quarantine, you'd raise Lima. The Lima flag, the L flag, is a yellow and black checkered flag. What it actually means is to communicate to other boats, you should stop, I have something important to communicate. And in that instance, you're communicating that someone has fallen ill.
So you might have bubonic plague or something on the boat and no one needs to come near.
Yeah. Well, apparently he goes on to say that the Diamond Princess did raise the Lima flag in Yokohama. Now this was in...
they had COVID on board.
Correct, yeah, they had over 700 cases.
Yes, okay.
And so they raised the Lima flag correctly. And then he says, then again, nobody hoists a black ball at anchor anymore. And we talked about that, didn't we?
We did, yes.
So I appreciate that, Dean Nihilist, for that, because I think it's important to get the clarification right on what these things mean. It is not the quarantine flag, it is simply the Q flag, which means free pratique in this instance. And
free pratique is something that you hear a lot of as you do what we're doing. So it's important that you understand what it is and how the flag works. Basically, it's still a flag you put up about quarantine, but that's all the correct terminology and the correct understanding of what it means. Didn't know about the checkered one.
The confusion comes, I think, because quarantine as a government department, when you come into a port, is involved in making sure that, yes, you are allowed free pratique. So that's perhaps where the confusion comes from. So yes, it's good that our listeners and viewers are correcting us.
It certainly is, yeah.
And just talking of corrections,
yes,
there have been a couple of corrections I've been meaning to make and I keep forgetting to say them.
Do it now.
Okay. Some weeks ago we talked about Brian and Penny, who had been travelling with us.
Yes.
And they made the jump from Nunakan direct to Bitung.
Correct.
And they ran into some horrible weather.
Yes.
And you had said they chose the wrong weather because they got hit by northeasterlies, and I agreed with you, and that was incorrect. They had chosen to go there and then because they had northwesterly winds.
So it's pushing them.
So it was pushing them.
Right.
So I wanted to make that correction because I didn't want people to think that Brian and Penny were being silly and not thinking about the weather, because they
Right.
were actually using the weather to their advantage.
They were, but they didn't know it was going to be quite as powerful as it turned out to be. And we know that from what happened to us as well.
Exactly. So I wanted to make that clear. And there was one other correction
Yeah, go.
that I promised Lee, of Jason and Lee, of
Yes.
Sailing Yacht Santorini. I promised him I would make this correction, and I completely forgot again. We were talking about them and the fact that they'd sailed back to Australia through Indonesia. They're now looking to sell their boat, which I called a Beneteau, and it's not. It's a Jeannot.
Of course it is. It's
Same-
a lovely boat.
Same stable, same camp, but yes,
Yeah.
it's a Jeannot. So Lee and Jason, really sorry about
Oh, sorry, boys.
that. And we miss you, by the way.
We do. Come back. Come sailing again. Come back out here. Okay, so moving on then from your corrections, we've just done SSB. Should we talk about the automatic identification system, otherwise known as AIS?
Do we have to?
We do, because it came up in the last one, and there were a couple of comments. Nothing surprises me here in Western Australia, says Sailing Someday. The International Maritime Organisation requires AIS to be fitted aboard all ships of 300 gross tonnage and upwards engaged on international voyages, cargo ships of 500 gross tonnage and upwards not engaged on international voyages, and all passenger ships irrespective of size. He says nothing surprises him because we mention the fact that we keep seeing big ships with no AIS signals. So if the vessels you saw fit those categories, they had it on board, but it was off. If they were outside those categories, it is not required. That is why I think it is so important, and this is the bit I want to get across, again and again, we'll keep getting this across, that short-handed sailors should seriously consider having a radar on board. Trusting that others have AIS, or trusting that it is on, may lead to them not keeping a good watch. A vessel that is 299 gross tonnage can do a whole lot of damage to a 14-metre sailboat not keeping a good watch.
Yeah, we've actually done a video on this as an extra. If you look in our YouTube playlists and look at our extras, we did Avoiding Collisions, I think it was called, and it was all about should you have radar or should you have AIS.
So we went into detail on that.
And I completely agree, and I still argue to this day, I think if you only had the choice of one, radar is still more important than AIS, but obviously having both is better. And funny enough, it was only yesterday we saw a ferry overtake us, and I looked at his AIS and the MMSI number didn't make sense. All it had was the first three numbers, which represent the country the boat is registered in. So every boat in the UK, its MMSI number will start 235. And here in Indonesia, it's 35. I can't remember what it is. And then all he had was a whole load of zeros.
Right.
So he
Made up.
hadn't put in the
dodgy.
MMSI number correctly. But at least he was on AIS.
Yes, but we could also see him. It is my biggest fear, is that a great big ship doesn't see us. So if you're radaring, pinging, and you've got your AIS on, you've got some chance. But the most important thing is you get out of their way, because they just may not see you. And we've been in those positions, but we'll talk about that in another forthcoming episode. I do want to talk about one other thing that we have discussed in the past and is still rumbling on and people get very exercised about, and that's secret places. So places we find that are absolutely fantastic but nobody goes to, and we are highlighting them on our YouTube channel. Some people still don't think we should do it, some people do. But I liked this comment. I'm only going to read this one from Bayani Custodio. Regardless of whether you tell others of those isolated places, someone, if not outsiders, then locally, will think of a way to make money out of the location. I know, I use YouTube to visit the place I grew up in. Now there is a local superhighway, causeway and hotels where there was none in 2001. It has gotten to the point where, other than the language, it would be no different than some of the upcoming tourist spots in Asia. I say, just be happy. You were there when... ... I originated in the Philippines, in the province of Sorsogon in the southeast end of the island of Luzon. I missed the sleepy fishing community where the smell of drying saltfish was the norm. We can go back, but never home. I thought that was such a lovely poetic comment.
That reminds me, first of all, of my aunt and uncle who had been to visit Bodrum, which is the town where we started our whole sailing all those years ago. They had been there in the 70s and they described it as a sleeping fishing village. Yes. And of course, when we got there, it was this thumping, thriving night hotspot for nightlife and clubs.
Known as Decibel Hell.
That's right, yes. Of course, all of these places we visit, and I think this is what they were alluding to in that comment, was that when you see a place for the first time, it's always going to be special. So even if you saw it 30 years after someone else saw it when it was a sleeping fishing village and you saw it as a thriving town, the fact that you've been there for the first time makes it exciting.
Yes,
you have no concept of what it was like as a sleepy fishing village. So your expectations aren't ruined. They are, however, ruined when you go back to visit these places 30 years later. I'm sure if my aunt and uncle went back to Bodrum, they would be horrified.
They wouldn't recognise it.
No. And likewise, I think if we went back to Bodrum now, we probably wouldn't recognise it, or it certainly would have changed.
Yes.
So I think, as they were saying, you make the most of it when you go and visit these places, but don't hang on to them too much and expect them to be different and to have changed were you to go back.
Yes. And I also want to say this other point, which to me is really important, is that change and development isn't always bad. We know that there are terrible developments that have ruined whole areas, but there are also very good developments that don't ruin and they do it nicely. So,
apart from this monstrosity, which if you're listening to the audio podcast, you won't be able to see it, but perhaps on video as we spin round at anchor, there is this concrete monstrosity on the end of the promontory here, and we think it's an unfinished hotel. We're not entirely sure. This is the biggest building we have seen, apart from in some of the big towns.
For weeks.
Along this whole coastline.
Yeah.
And I think I even said to camera, which yet to come out on video, I said when we talked about positive development of areas, that is not an example of it.
Because all around us is mangroves, not mangoes, as someone thought I said.
No, you did say mangoes.
Did I?
You did. You said, it's an easy mistake to make. We've all said it. Surrounded by mangoes.
Yes, I wish we were surrounded by mangoes, but mangroves are good enough.
Yes.
So this is a lovely spot. So just going back to Indonesia, the episode that came out this weekend when we couldn't get in, Donovan Lani. Indonesia, in times like these, being British, I gently sail to Australia or close to food. Food supply chain issues are mounting. And you replied, as long as we can get rice and vegetables locally, we're good. Australia is a long way away. Yes, Australia is a long way away from us. It's not on the cards for us. And I think a few people have misunderstood the problem that we were in at that stage, which was where to go. Yeah, we could go to Australia. Someone said, why don't you go to the Pacific Islands? To which some wag came back and said, yeah, I hear the weather's nice in Oklahoma. The point was that we couldn't get anywhere, not that we didn't have places to aim for.
My point of that response was that for us, apart from the safety of the boat and ourselves, on a day-to-day basis, our concerns are getting food and fuel.
That's all we need.
And I don't know how self-sufficient or independent Sulawesi is in terms of its manufacturing and production of foodstuffs, but certainly at the moment there doesn't seem to be any supply issues.
No.
So as long as we can get basics, then we're good.
There's always mangoes. There's so many growing here.
Sorry for interrupting, but while I've got you here, if you like what we do and you want to support us and become a Patreon, or join us on FTB Mates, or even drop a quid in the rum fund, go to followtheboat.com/pub. Of course, come to the pub.
Okay, and then Jim Henderson. While most of the world is opening up, what the hell is going on in Indonesia? If these parts are closed, can you imagine the locals still looking for work and tourism or tourists? What are the conditions? So obviously, as you've already said, we recorded that a few weeks ago and things have moved on a bit since then. And Indonesia is opening up, but a lot of the ports are closed. But we've heard from a friend of ours, haven't we, recently, about how difficult life has been.
Yes, good point. Thanks for reminding me about that, because I thought of this the other day, and it goes back to development and locals wanting tourism. And this was a person we had met as a guide in a particular island. I'm not going to mention any names.
Well, we can say it's the Anambas, can't we?
Okay, you've given the game away, but I didn't want to highlight this person's plight, because for this person, it's very embarrassing for them, because their industry was tourism, and it was on a very low-key level, in that they were just a guide that helped yachties get fuel, take them out on scooter rides and so on. And of course, the Anambas, being so isolated from the rest of Indonesia, was really hit badly by the pandemic when everything shut down. And this person, of course, could no longer work in his or her basic tourism role, and had to go back. I say go back, but I don't think they ever were in the first place. They had to go to fishing.
Yeah, it's the only thing.
And
to get food.
And they became a fisherman. And I got in touch with them the other day. I've been in communication with them all this whole pandemic, but they said that even fishing is difficult. They're finding it difficult to actually catch enough fish, obviously overfished area. And they sent me a picture of their meal that night, and it almost broke my heart. You know, it was just a bit of dried fish and this mango, funnily enough, this little mango curry sauce, and that's all they could put together. So their livelihood was completely destroyed by the pandemic, and by the fact that their tourism job went out the window, and now they are really struggling.
So this is an actual example of everything that we've heard since the pandemic hit. It affected a lot of people in Sabah. We heard about the poverty, we heard about the government handing out money and food parcels and so forth. This is someone we know very well, and that's a absolutely perfect example of how badly they have been hit and how important tourism is.
Yes. Yeah. And I emphasise that low-level tourism because, you know, this person wasn't a travel agent. They weren't working for a big hotel. They were just a local person with local knowledge who was quite happy to help yachties for a nominal fee as well. Yes. And became a friend, and is just one of those very, very nice people that you meet. And so when you hear about how the whole thing has affected them, it's very sad. But on a lighter note,
yes,
can we just give a big shout out to a couple of people from Sabah, actually, who I haven't heard from these people before, but Kiang Wee Chu, I'm really sorry, Kiang, if I've mispronounced that, who said, "Bon voyage, safe journey to Palawan or Indonesia," because of course they weren't sure which way we were going. "Thank you for your stay in Sabah during lockdown." And Sunflower says, "See you guys. Thanks for staying in Malaysia and hope that you guys will visit Sabah again. Love you guys from Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, Malaysia. Just wanted to say how great it is to hear from people that we have met or in places that we have been to."
Yes, and we loved Sabah. There's no doubt about that. And I'm pretty sure we will get back there at some stage. 100% certain, actually, that we will get back there at some stage.
And talking of local people and communicating with us, Daniel Warden has got a great comment. Yes. He's got a great comment. He says, "I love how the fuel jockey, out of respect, addressed you, Liz, as Mrs., regardless of actual marital status."
Yes.
And this is something that is forever amusing to us. In Indonesia, so many people refer to both you and me as Mr.
Yes, that was my reply to him. That was quite unusual that I was called Mrs. They normally just shout out, "Hello, Mister," to me. And I know I've cut my hair short, but there are other attributes I've got which are definitely not male.
It is a standard shout out that we get everywhere is, "Hello, Mister, how's it going?"
I did ask somebody here why do they always say that? It was Yaya actually, and she said they know that it's a welcome, they know that it's a happy and good thing to say, but they don't know the literal translation of what they're saying. So to them it's just, "Great to see you." They don't know what they're saying, but they just know it's a good thing.
Daniel goes on, "So Mrs, which is it, Liverpool or Manchester?" Now, he didn't specify Manchester City or Manchester
Yeah, so
United.
we were talking football for those that don't know. Soccer to those that call it that.
Yes.
Well, you're a Liverpool supporter.
I am a latent Liverpool supporter, so it's Liverpool all the way.
Queen's Park Rangers for me, but I couldn't name
Sorry, who?
I know. I'm not sure if they're even still in the league. They've been doing so badly. I don't know the names of any of the players anymore, but I used to be a member. I used to go down every week to watch them play. Oh, in another life, in an alternative life. Right, well, we have got some people who have been inspired to buy boats, but I think we're coming to the end now, so we'll hold those off till next week.
We should hold those off.
Yes, and we'll just finish with one person who said, "Do your Disney sponsorship, I have unsubscribed you." What does it mean?
No idea. Absolutely no idea.
Sorry, something to do with, I don't know. But we do get, just wanted people to know, we get some very weird comments sometimes that we cannot answer.
We got a very funny comment. I say funny, peculiar, not funny, ha-ha, from a person that went on this massive rant about World War III. And I was saying back in 2017 that this day was coming. And then he said, by the way, I delete my comments. I like to just keep them up there long enough for you to... It's like, no, the reason why you delete your comments is because you're talking absolute horse shit. And you know in 3 years' time, when you look back on this comment, you'll realise you're talking horse shit and it will make you look stupid. Yes. But I mean, just some of the comments we get are just odd.
They are really strange, but I'm glad to say we don't get many of those.
No.
We don't. We're quite lucky, actually. We don't get many bad ones. And we don't usually delete them. We only delete them if they are abusive.
If they're personal, yes, we'll delete them. But yeah, no, we leave the comments up. Yeah. As we've said before, we do try to respond to every comment, certainly within the first 24 hours.
We do indeed. So that's it. That's the end of number 14. What are you going to do now?
Well... Yesterday when we came in, we had an issue with something around the prop, and it caused all kinds of problems when we were trying to put it.